not only the engine, but the windlass anchor winch, that will require cold crank amps. It really does look like it was made exactly for this job. I've just been sitting down here mulling over what sort of design might look good. I've now cut out the base for the starting battery. Well, I'm recording this bit because although I did already record it with my pretty damn good Olympus mirrorless camera, I've noticed that the video function on that really doesn't get the colours right. It's very brown and it lacks the light. So I thought I'd better just get this part refilmed with my little faithful GoPro, because that does a good job with the colours and with low light. Anyway, what I'm getting at is this space here. It sort of dawned on me as time was going on and I was building this nav area, keeping in mind that there's a lot of electrical work that will now need to be able to be considered, and I'll be able to start doing that. In particular, the starting battery, not only the engine, but the windlass anchor winch, that will require cold crank amps in a battery, which the lithium house batteries really are not set up to provide that sort of power. It looks like I will be going for an AGM battery for the starting battery, but I have been tossing and turning actually for years about where exactly should I put that battery. I was thinking that it would be good to have it right behind the engine where it's required, but the issue with that was it would mean needing to run that electrical cable, that large electrical cable for the windlass, either up and over the coach reef and down to the battery there, or else down and under the bilge and then back to that battery. There was always going to be some little problem to tackle. So the great thing is, with the passage of time and with just doing the hands-on building work with the nav station here, it came to me about 2 weeks ago that I've got the perfect spot for the battery for the engine and the windlass. And that is just here on this bulkhead. What I'll do is I'll make a shelf, and it will be very, very strong with knees underneath, nice rosewood knees. But what it'll mean is it'll be out of the way. It'll be right here where it's required. It's very close to the engine. And just with that, with the cable sizing from the battery to the engine for starting purposes is much, much smaller than the cable required to run power from here all the way forward to Mistress's bow to run that windlass. So it makes more sense to have the battery here, because that means less resistance for that lengthy trip to the windlass, and also less length in running that cable into the engine compartment here. The engine's right here. The cables will just run down in the bilge and pop up right here where the battery is. The windlass cables are here. I actually had got enough length to actually go up and over the coach roof, which will now not be required, which, although that was very expensive, it provides a much better solution to have those cables shorter for the whole resistance aspect of it. So I'm pretty excited about that, as you can probably tell. So now it's a matter of measuring up and making a shelf here, which will be big enough to house the likely size batteries that I'm looking at. I have already been looking at different batteries, and the AGM batteries do look like the winner at this point in time. I'll make that shelf a bit larger than necessary, and what I will be able to do is just have different width spaces on the base to absolutely nestle that snug. And in the future, if I get a battery that's a different size, that will be easy fixed. I can just cut up some little wedge spaces and replace the ones that I'm going to have for the battery I originally get. So that really was a happy outcome for this penny to drop and solve this problem with the starting battery. So what I'm going to do here with the sinks, obviously they need to be sealed so water doesn't get underneath and leak down. I've been to my local rubber store. This is called EPDM rubber. Apparently it should be exactly what I'm after for this sort of application. It's not hard like that insertion rubber that I've used throughout other spots here in the boat. But yeah, I think that'll be great. It's exactly the right width. It really does look like it was made exactly for this job. So that will go under the lip of the sink. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually first of all adhere this with some Fix 15 directly to the sinks, and then I'll put some Fix 15 on the lip of the sink penetrations, put those sinks down on top, and that will seal that. Now that's not going to happen immediately because I do have a little trim job to do on these sinks. I deliberately left where they're joining a little bit longer than I knew they needed to be so that I could get them in and play with that later. I did not want a big wide gap and then have to try and troubleshoot that. So this needs a little trim. It's just overlapping a little bit, a few mil. I'll get that right, and then they can be all fastened down and the sinks fitted in place. So I've got a few things on the go here, and the next thing to do with this saloon table is to work out where this stainless steel angle is going to be fitted underneath, where those struts will bolt to support this table. The other thing is this little fill-in piece. I've just been sitting down here mulling over what sort of design might look good, and I've come up with something which will be fine, I think, and I'll dress it up a little bit with a bit of shaping. So that's a work in progress. So I've just had to think about where I should put this angle and I've come up with something which will keep those struts away from your legs when you're getting in and out, and will be quite discreet. So I'll take this table off now, and I'll be able to take that below, mark out where I'm going to have that angle, cut that up, and then I will need to weld that together. So what I'm up to here is making that block spacer for the saloon table. I've made a start here. I've just cut a bit of rosewood to length. I've had that thickness down from my good friends, the joinery place just here, and I've just made a start with the cut to remove that section that'll go around and wrap around the mast pillar. What I'll do after that, because this is not quite thick enough, all the rosewood planking that I have is only approximately 54 millimeters thick. So this is now down to 52 millimeters, which means I need to get another 13 millimeters to make up my 65 millimeters. And I'll do that by just cutting up some pieces and joining those with some epoxy glue. The other thing I'm doing here, I've now cut out the base for the starting battery. And so what that will need is a couple of nice strong 45-degree knees on each side to make that nice and strong. The other thing I'll be doing is making up some rosewood fiddles for the edges. I only need to do 2 because this edge will be up against that end panel of the nav station, and the back is that main bulkhead separating the nav area to the heads. So here we are. This is my block. What I've done there is I've just ripped up some strips. None of this will be seen, so it really didn't need to be in one piece. So that's the idea. What I'll do is I'll just epoxy adhere all those together, and as I say, there's my little block. So that should be fine. What I'll do now actually is I'll just get a bit of epoxy on both of the surfaces that are going to be bonded together, and the reason for that is so that you don't end up with what's called a dry fit. When you just put epoxy glues straight onto the timber, if it hasn't been pre-coated, that epoxy will be drawn into the timber, leaving a dry join. So that's the idea. You first put down a coat of epoxy and then a second coat for the actual glue joint. And just to add as well, as much as I do appreciate my little GoPro, I'm so looking forward to getting back my good Sony video camera. That is just the best and so easy to use. So hopefully this week I get some good news. Let's see. The other thing to say is, folks, please hop on board and get some good SY Mistress merchandise. There's plenty still there. The smaller sizes of the shirts are nearly gone, but there are a lot of large sizes of shirts, so please do me a favour and do yourself a favour. Get some good SY Mistress merchandise. Well, that was a quick job to get those little fiddles for that shelf for the battery. Now it's on to the support, the knee What I have in mind is just something like this. This is just the leftover from the piece that's mounted against that bulkhead to take the knees for the navigation seat. So, waste not, want not. And so that's going to be fine. As I say, none of this is going to be seen, but I sort of have in mind something like that with a little straight cut down here, of course, to get the length right. Another little job, which I've had on my mind, not forgetting things that I'm missing along the way, is that little piece that was the wrong position for that sink drainage going to the through hole fitting. You might remember that I made a bit of a up there, and so what I've done now, I've just traced that shape and transferred that to this bit of plywood. So what I'll do now is I'll do my best to get that to be cut as snug a fit as possible. I don't want it too snug though, because it will need to be glued with epoxy glue. That needs a little bit of a gap for its best effect. So that's what I'll do now. I'll cut this up, get that shaped, and I can epoxy coat that along with everything else that I'm doing to join them. While I'm doing these other jobs, I'm just going to get this galley top finished as well, because as you might remember, I've just got this little trim to do here. It's really not much. So what I'm planning to do is I've actually taped this plastic in place so that when I put the circular saw on, which is what I'm going to use to actually remove that bit of rosewood, it'll actually be sitting on the plastic and it won't scratch that top. Obviously I don't want to get that scratched. I'll measure my 124mm off, get a straight edge clamped in place. I'll set the depth of the circular saw blade just to take off that rosewood, no more, and then after I'll just put a couple of coats of epoxy on that, and that'll be that. There has been some ups and downs over the last few weeks for me, such is life, hey? But in the next episode, well, how good is this, everybody? The Sony video camera is back in action. Looking good, and that will be very, very strong. Please like, subscribe, hit that bell and share. I'd really, really appreciate that.